Hey everybody, Buzz Miller, Wannabe Studios. Today I'm teaching Isaac how to change strings on a fully floating Floyd. Fully floating Floyd, fully floating Floyd. That's kind of difficult to say, but it's even more difficult to change strings if you don't know what's going on. So we're either going to change all the strings or we broke one. Fully floating Floyds, or Ibanez Edge, or very similar tremolos, have springs on the backside and strings on the top side. They have to maintain the perfect tension between the two. You tighten the springs up and the strings get tighter and your Floyd starts aiming backwards. You have too much string tension, not enough spring tension, it goes forward. You break one string, well, you lost your tension here, and now your Floyd's kicked back, all the rest of your strings are way too high. This is not an E anymore, that's way higher. Now, fully floating is cool. We're going to teach you in our next video how to stop it from being fully floating. But today, we got to change the strings because we got to practice. So, fully floating is cool because you can go all those cool little tricks. You can do warbles, whatever it is. But sometimes it's a pain in the butt. We've just broken a string and we need to change it. So, what do we need? We need a couple of tools. They're called dikes. For political correctness, we are going to call them end snips today, but their real term is dikes. Then we need the right size Allen wrench. The same size is going to be loosening the string from the backside and unlocking from here. Chances are we know how to unlock and tune. Maybe we don't know how to change strings. So we're going to need those, and the third thing is a wonderful set of Sparso strings. You can use other strings, but why would you? Okay, so we got our Sparso touchstones. We're going to change strings. Hang on. Okay, we're going to do a quick history class because there's a lot of different types of Floyds and Ibanez Edge type stuff. I know you've got an Ibanez guitar. So let's talk about the original Edge. Now this baby is historic. I think this is, as far as I know, this is the first Ibanez model guitar to actually have an edge on it. So what happens is this is a long screw that actually presses on that black lock and holds your string into place against the piece here. So this is adjusted by this on how tight back it is or forward, and that adjusts the pitch as it's changing the rotation of this slide here. So you want your string higher, you put it tighter. You want it more loose, back there. So that's how you change your tuning once you're all locked in. That's the original. You put your Allen wrench back in here, you loosen it, it loosens that, you tighten it, it tightens up against there, so it locks it in. So that's the first model. Then they started doing what's called a low TRS. I don't have a low TRS here, I've got one over there, but this is really similar. So what's happening here is this has a piece that goes underneath this, and the micro adjuster changes again your pitch, but it doesn't lock from back there, it locks from up here on the top. So you put them in through here and that locks up against that bigger slide and pins it the same kind of way. So a lot of times you'll see people with the standard Floyds and the original Edge, they'll be changing strings from back here, you may be back here. So, I've got a new Ibanez Premium. This guy has, again, you don't even really see much. Everything is kind of subterranean on this. But you actually look in here, rather than have a nice big piece out of the back that shows you where to do your adjustment, this guy is inset in here at a little bit of an angle. Again, he has a little black lock. This is a lot harder to get out and in. Those original ones, you'd lose your little black piece and it would be gone forever, and you'd get really upset because then you got to buy a pair on eBay and they're like 12 bucks to get 6 of them, and then you always put one in upside down so it screws it up and you don't have a guitar for over a week. So these are a lot harder to flip out of there, but your lock may be here. Again, all your micro adjusters are in the same location, and they haven't really changed much here. What they have changed is back in the early day, all the angles had to be lined up like a mountain. Now they line up differently because people would put them in upside down so many times. So pull these off and take a peek at the bottom and see how it's machined. You should have flat on one side, flat on the other side, and kind of a raised in the middle. You want flat on the back side here and the front side here. You don't want it this way. You want to hold the string in the two positions, not sit kind of like that, because what they'll do is it'll try to push the string into the center, and if it can push it into the center, where you had it tightened is now not tight enough, and it unlocks it. So don't take these off unless you kind of know what you're looking at. If you know what you're looking at, you're looking for the bow, and it's not that, it's real minor, but you can see it bows to the outside. Those go to the front and the back of the string, not the other way around. So don't always make sure you've got your mountains lined up. It might be different direction. So that's the 3 or 4 kinds we see. This is a standard, an actual Floyd Rose. Those were all Ibanez Edge. And this is real similar to the original Edge, where you hit them from the back. This actually sits on that string, that screw, and raises and lowers the pitch. All right, first thing we're going to do, let's say we're going to change all the strings out. You do not want to take all the strings off of a Floyd, because now we've got all the spring tension in the back, and it slaps the thing up against the back of the string, and it's really hard to put our strings in. So we're going to change one at a time. That's how you do a Floyd Rose or similar tremolo if it's still full floating. One at a time. Do not change more than one string at a time. So let's say we broke a string. Whoopsie. So I've got a string broken. What am I going to do? Let's go up here and loosen them all, or at least the one that I just broke. Let's loosen that one. Okay, now it's unlocked. So now this is actually the tension of the string, not just down here. So I can loosen that up. Then I go to the back. I'm going to put some high-res pictures up too to make it a little bit easier to see. But we put that baby in the back. We pull it out about a full turn. A full turn on the non-wound strings is usually way more than you need. On the wound strings, you might need a turn and a half. Do not go more than that. These have little black little piece that slides into there. Those will fall out. If you lose them, you're kind of stuck. You got to buy replacements. They also have a little indention. The indention's down on the bottom side. If you put them in upside down, it kind of messes them up, because when you tighten them up against there, they press, it wants to swell that little black slide, and it won't come out anymore, or it won't slide back and forth. Then you got to sand them. It gets really difficult. So we broke that string. So we've got this side already taken off. We're going to take this. Now, got to get the back side of this out of there. Now the string didn't break back here, so I'm good. I loosened it, pulled it out, we're good. If the little piece of string is still stuck in there, it won't let the next one have the right tension. So I like to take all my strings and I like to wind them up, kind of like they came, so I don't lose them. They don't fall on the floor and I stab them into my foot later, which I've done. I think everybody's done that. Now I go through about 30 to 35 sets of strings a year, so I do this a lot. Hopefully you won't need to do it that often. I broke E-A-D-G. I broke a G string. So probably not the string you want to break. So we're going to go grab a G string. Whoop. I play 9 to 42, so my G string is going to be a 16. Take our string, without kinking it, without getting it crazy, get it out straight. Take the ball end. The ball end is going to be wrapped around itself. As soon as you're past the wrap and into the standard string, grab it with your finger. Then you're going to take your end snips and you're going to snip that baby off. You don't want any of the wound part into there, because it's not going to give you the proper tension. You cut that off and you put it to the side. Again, don't let it get on the carpet, because you're going to stab your foot into it and bleed, and it's going to hurt really, really bad. So I dropped my Allen wrench. We're going to put it in here. We're going to slide it in until it touches the bottom. You want to make sure you're centered. You don't want it way to one side where it's going to have to go crossways to exit the saddle. You want it dead center with the saddle. So you kind of want to watch that as you're tightening it up. You do not want to over tighten these. These are very small. They're not made of great steel. The threads aren't wonderful. So we do the 2-finger rule. The 2-finger. You tighten it with 2 fingers. Once you're done kind of tightening it with just the end of your 2 fingers, you're done. Don't crank it. Couple of reasons. Number one, if you crank it when it's on the wound strings, it actually hurts them and it lets it fling out. But on the non-wound strings, again, just the end of your fingers. You don't need it that tight. Feed it through this. You can also take this pad all the way off if you want. So you just feed that through, get it into your tuner area. I'm going to actually slip this guy back on because I'm going to need a second hand here in a little bit. Now we have lock nuts. This is what's called a lock nut down here. Lock nuts make it so the string tension actually sits between here and here. They call it a locking tremolo. So it locks here, it locks here. So it doesn't matter what's down around the tuning peg portion. So we don't need a lot of winds around our tuning peg. A lot of times if we have good tuning pegs that have a nice sharp edge, a half a wind is enough. If you've got ones that aren't great, put 1.5 wind. Don't have it wound around there 19 times. There's no reason to have that. So, got this guy. I'm going to feed it through the tuning peg. Important to be able to see, which I really can't right now. Okay, so we got it going through the tuning peg. Add a little tension to this side until it kind of grabs on the tuning peg. And then if you have a speed winder, you can use those. If you haven't seen a speed winder, they have a little handle on them and you put them on and crank, 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 and it goes a little faster. If you're going to change 10 strings, 10 guitars with all strings in a day, get a speed winder. If not, you can have one. I don't use them. Okay, so don't yank on it like I broke the original string. Apply just a little bit of tension. What this string wants to do, it wants to stretch out. So we're just helping it stretch out a little. If you do this just a little bit, you won't have that 1 day or 1 hour, depending on how much you're playing, where the string stretches out again and you gotta retune it and then stretches out and retune it. If you give it just a little bit of stretch, it won't need to stretch out anymore. You set it in tune in 5 minutes. If I were done with throwing all the strings on here in 5 minutes, it's in tune, done. Lock it down, it won't move again. So I'm doing that a little bit. Now, get it in tune with the rest of the guitar. If you don't tune this string and you go to change another one and then another one, you're going to find that getting it in tune and then your springs on the back, and then you're going to have to retune everything again. If you found out that it's really hard to tune a fully floating Floyd, this is why. Get that string in tune with the rest before you go on to change the next one. It needs to go up a long ways. Then get on there and bend it a couple of times. That again is helping us stretch it out. Let's see if it moved any. Now it's lower already, so we're stretching it out. Pretty close. That's what we do to change those strings. Change one, change another one, another one, another one, another one. Do not change more than one string at one time. That is the one key to making this fully floating Floyd work. All right, I hope that worked for you. Now I'm going to change the other 5 and play a little bit, but I'm going to turn the video off because you've seen kind of what we need to do. Once we've got that, don't clip this until tomorrow, because if something happens and either this, you didn't tighten it quite enough and it pops out, don't take that off until we know the strings are set, we've played around with it, everything's cool, and now we're ready to chop it off. And then when we chop it off, just make sure you don't chop any of the good side of the string. You just want to chop off the outside. You can also bend them over. You can do the old Vinnie Moore thing where he used to spin them and he had 6 little. We're going to assume that we're just changing strings, we didn't break one. So I'm going to just show you one more. Okay, we're in tune. We make sure this next string, it's close enough for what we're doing. Okay, so now we're good. So we're going to change the next string, we're going to change the D string. That's already loose, and I'm going to make all of them loose since I'm going to set everything back up when we're done. Now Isaac, if you want to send your guitar to me, or if I'm ever going to come up there, I will make it so the thing doesn't fully float, so you can change strings a lot easier. It's going to tune a lot easier. It's going to be a lot easier to maintain, but you can still do your super cool dive bombs. So I'm going to change the next string. What am I going to do? Okay, it's there, it's in tune. I'm happy with where the Floyd's sitting. Take it down. I'm going to turn the volume down a little bit. I go back in here, I'm going to unlock it. I'm going to go at least a full turn, maybe a little bit more. Going to make sure the bent portion went into there and came out okay. Not going to go back far enough to let the little black slide, the black lock fall out. Pull that guy out of there. Needs just a little bit more clearance because of the bend that's on the end. He's out. Going to wind it up a couple of times. Wow, like kryptonite to Superman right here. Can't wind this string. Okay, that one's going to go over there in the spent file, and then I pull out my next, which is going to be my D string, which is my 24. Now what this number is, 024, 025, 032, that is thousandths of an inch. So it's 0.024 when you measure it out with a micrometer. That's the width of the string. The bigger the number, the heavier, the fatter the string. The smaller the number, the finer of the string. Now, we have heard that getting a big, huge string gives you more thick, meaty tone. I actually did a bunch of tests with that. I don't see it. So get what's comfortable to your guitar and to your fingers. If you do have a fully floating Floyd, again, just past all the windings to where it's just a standard string, clip that baby. Where was I? So if you do have a fully floating Floyd, that was really tough to say. Don't use a super heavy gauge string. Some of these guys are in the 58s on the low E. They're trying to make a 7-string or an 8-string guitar sound out of a 6-string, and they'll flat finger the thing. They really like a certain amount of tension. They were designed for a certain amount of tension. Putting a giant string on them kind of confuses it, and it throws off the intonation a little bit, so you really have to be on it when you start adding thicker strings. So what I'm doing is I put the long end in until it's kind of snug. Once it's snug, then I put the short end in, so I've got the long end to kind of hang on. And I just, again, end of the fingertip tight. That's all the tighter you want it. Feed that baby through. This does have what's called a string tree, which takes the tension of the strings down. Make sure you get it under that. You do not want to miss that one. If you go over the top, it adds tension, and the back of this side, the string tree is nice and rounded and smooth, so it doesn't hurt the string when it comes across. If it goes over the top, these edges are kind of sharp and it will hurt your string. So put a pinch in it or whatever. So I'm going to wind it until it's actually starting to grab. Wind it to that point. Now I feel it starting to grab, so I'm adding some tension here. Tighten it as I'm adding tension. I always like my first wind to go underneath this, so I'll pull it up and out. Let it go underneath. Once it goes underneath, then I'm good. I don't need to worry about this side anymore. And I just stretch it out a little bit. So I kind of showed you how to stretch it out, but that's the end of the second video. So just do that 6 times. You got all new strings on. They sound great. Any questions, give me a holler. This should help you. Catch you later. Keep on rocking.